so I'm ready to hear your sob story, whatever the sadness is.
Oh, man. Well, we are recording this as we both recover from a long and mostly enjoyable Memorial Day weekend. But let me tell you about Friday as we're getting ready to go. The kids are in school. Carolyn is at home packing. We're going to go camping. We typically do like a family camping deal on Memorial Day weekends, and there's a YMCA campground in the Poconos. And us and a couple of other families that all have kids about Alex and Max's age, we all get together, we get a big cabin, and there's everything there. There's a lake. The kids can go boating and fishing and hiking and biking and horseback riding and mostly it's all kind of secluded so they can be independent for 3 days straight. We don't eat. We meet up for meals, which is all at this central dining hall, which is great because you don't have to make the food. You know, it's just there. And other than that, they just run wild, which is good for younger kids to have that kind of independence is a good thing. And so we're looking forward to this. And
wait, I gotta stop you. Does this story end with you in a well, like stuck in a well?
No, I'm just getting the good part of the story out of the way, so you can tell, so you can see when I tell you the rest of this, you'll know what I was up against. But no, the actual I'll flip over some of the cards. We did make it to the campground, and it was a fantastic 3 days, but Friday...
Oh, no. I know I'm in for trouble story-wise when it starts off with, we did make it to the campground.
Oh, my God. So it's Friday afternoon, and I'm trying to do the last big push for getting Patreon stuff out and getting it over to Alex so she can color it. And, kind of finish the month real strong. And I think I told you last show, I had lagged behind a little this month, so I had a wide open Friday, and I've got a whole bunch of projects lined right up, and it's like, oh, I can do this, this, and this. I can get this done, and no problems whatsoever. And Bonjoro, I've been doing that, and that's been going great. So every now and again, I'll get a Bonjoro, and I've kind of loosened up. I've unclenched a little bit, and I have been recording those videos in under 3 takes for the most part. So that has been nice. And
it's also good anytime you can use the phrase unclenched. That's always nice.
Truly. So I'm cranking over here, right? I've got some music playing, and I every now and again I'll get to a little stopper at the illustration, check my email, see a Bonjoro, this and that, right? And one of the speaking of Bonjoros, one of them that I set up was I couldn't set up one through BackerKit, but since BackerKit uses Stripe, I was able to use Zapier to connect my Stripe to Bonjoro, so that if somebody pre-ordered something in BackerKit, that would trigger a Stripe alert, which would then trigger a Bonjoro, right?
Right, great.
So this is on my mind, and as well. And earlier in the morning, it was kind of weird. I got this really weird phishing attempt that was so dumb. The dumbest it came across. Amazon Prime is sending me a $30 refund. And I take one look at that, and I'm like, that's fishy as hell. So instead of clicking anything in the email, I open up my web browser, I go to Amazon, I type it in, bada-beep, bada-bop, bada-boop. I see I've got no refunds. I chuckle to myself with a sense of superiority, and I mark it as spam, and I go on with my day. Because, Dave, I am nothing if not a smart web consumer. I am somebody...
Brad Geiger, modern consumer.
Listen, I've been doing business on the web for almost 20 years, Dave. I know every trick in the book, and I'm much too smart for these
I love this.
people.
I love this setup for the eventual fall of whatever's about to happen. This is great.
So I'm cranking away on this illustration, and I get, and this is hours after the email I was just talking about, and I get a notification from Stripe, and $70 has been placed in my account. Now, I look over, there's no Bonjoro, and I'm like, oh shit, I must have connected something wrong. I want to find out what this person, now I want to, and you can you can manually place somebody's email address into Banjuro, and then you can send them an email that way. It doesn't have to be triggered by what they call an automation.
Right.
So, hey, I better find $70, Dave, that's a handful of books. That's a video thank you I want to put out immediately, because that's how a well-seasoned web entrepreneur works. And I can see there that there is a web address spelled out. Because Dave, I'm too smart to click on a button. I'm not going to click on a button. What do I look like? A Ute? No. I know what I'm doing. And right down there, they've got the https://dashboard.stripe.com/user and then ... I click on this.
Oh, no.
Because I can see it spelled right out. And it takes me to a Stripe page, and it says.
And unfortunately, this Stripe page is maintained by a man named Vladimir in St. Petersburg.
And Chrome, oddly enough, seems to my username and my password pop right in. But I don't remember using that email address to sign up. But does that stop me? No, because I've got an illustration to get back to, and I'm going to go camping, and it's going to be fun. And so I hit connect. And then it says, since you haven't used Stripe in a while, we need to verify your account. Please tell us your bank account number. Dave, they didn't ask for a credit card that I could call up and have canceled in a 5-minute phone call, because I have had to do that before. They didn't ask for a debit account number that I could call up and get canceled in 5 minutes.
Oh, no. You did fall down a well. Oh, no.
They asked for my bank account number, and because I wanted to get back to this illustration, I whirl around in my chair, fish my checking book out, and I type in my fucking bank account, hit send, and and it sends me to an authentic Stripe page, and I'm looking at it, and none of that stuff looks right.
No. Oh, Brad, I got to tell you, I have tangible anxiety right now in this point of the story. I'm so anxious. Oh God.
Imagine my anxiety, because by the way, that's where all my Kickstarter money is.
Oh no.
And now it's dawning on me that I'm a big dumb guy. And I do a quick Google search. What could somebody do if they get a hold of your bank account number? And immediately somebody says, well, listen, all they've got to do is figure out what bank it's from. And this is not a small bank. All they got to do is figure out what bank it's from, go in there, do a wire transfer, and you're done.
Oh, God.
Fuck me. So I go running to my local bank chapter, and I walk in, and there are 3 people ahead of me waiting for the customer service rep. Neither one of the 2 tellers can help me do what I need to do, and so I wait for an hour. And this is about 1:00 in the afternoon. So I wait for an hour, and I go in and I tell them what happened. Okay, no problem. They say we can get this straightened right around right now. Sit down. Here we go. What's your bank account number? And I give it to them, because that seemed to be the thing to do that day. And and she says, "Oh no, it's a business account. You've got to bring in proof of your EIN. You got to bring in proof of your DBA and a bunch of other. And we can't do it unless you have that information." So I go back to the studio, and I'm just.
Well, could you at least, while you were there, just say put a freeze? Oh no, you can't, because you have to have.
And I couldn't close out the account, or I couldn't do too much to the account, because I had 3 pending transactions, which were all legitimate.
Oh, Brad, I got to tell you, I am not enjoying this story. My anxiety is going through the roof. I need to know if your kids are going to eat this month. This is making me very anxious.
My kids are going to eat this month.
Okay. Oh God. Thank God. Okay. So, that's right. You did get to the campground. All right.
I did get to the campground.
So there was a happy ending.
And they didn't find me, at the bottom of some bog with a note tied to my shoes. It was okay.
I want to cut to the other side of the story, right? So while Brad is going home to get his EIN number and his proof of DBA and all that sort of stuff, so we're gonna smash cut to St. Petersburg, where Igor swivels around on his chair and goes, "Vladimir, you won't believe what just happened. Idiot enters bank number. We have it. He's full in Philadelphia. He tried to get to campground."
And so just as a tangent, as long as we're in St. Petersburg, one quick tangent. So you look at like Amazon Prime, and by the way, they both had the same logo at the bottom. And go to my Twitter because I posted the logo. It's an app called Get Response, and it has a little circular logo. Both of these phishing attempts both used this app called Get Response. Whatever that is, I don't know what it is, but they both had it in common. So go to my Twitter feed and look at my posts from this past week. Familiarize yourself with that logo so that if you see it, your antenna goes up. But
God.
So I'm back at the studio and I'm like, oh, okay. I think I've got everything. I am fairly organized. I think I can find 2 out of the 3 documents that she said. And I did. And I said, screw it, I'm going to go back. So I go back with these documents. And I said, I've got this and I've got this. And I said, what can we do? And she says, we're not going to be able to fully shut down that account. She says, but we can open up a new account. And I said, okay, so let's say we open up a new account and we take all of the money from my other account and put it in the new account. Now I've got 2 accounts, but one of them has no money in it to wire transfer away from, and the other one is a new one and therefore safe. She says, we can do that. I said, oh, thank goodness. Now it is 2:45 and I got to go pick up my kid from school. And they're expecting to go that I'm going to pick up the younger one. We're going to go home and get right on the road to beat the traffic on the Schuylkill going out to the Poconos, right? Because it's Memorial Day weekend. So she goes, listen, leave all this stuff here. It was my EIN number and this and that. And at this point, she's going to see it anyway. So I either trust her or I trust her, right? She goes, leave all this stuff here. Go get your kid. Come back here. I'll have everything filled out. All we got to do is dot I's and cross T's. Great. So I run and I get my kid. I call my wife. I tell her what's going on. I'm like, we're not going to leave on time. It's going to have to be okay. And we'll leave when we leave. And this has got to be handled. She's like, oh, yeah, I totally get it. Don't worry about it. I won't let anybody get their nose bent out of joint. We'll be ready when you get here. I go back. We spend the next hour and a half setting this up, which also involves me having to do like a sales call with somebody at the bank who wants to remind me that it's safer to use a credit card than a debit card. And
a sales call with somebody at the bank that says not to give bank numbers to Vladimir.
Yeah, the way you would talk to an idiot. And and the long story short is they got everything. Now I still have to go down to the bank and confirm everything. But they opened up a new account with my information. They transferred the money over to that account. So if somebody does try to do a wire transfer from the old account, there's nothing there for them to get. And hopefully, knock on wood, other than the fact that I'll have to be doing a credit report check on myself every couple months here until I'm clear of it. I have seemed to have gotten to the other side of it.
Oh, my God.
But I literally got into the car and just vibrated. I flung Carolyn the keys. I said, you're going to have to drive. You do not want me behind the wheel during Labor Day traffic or Memorial Day traffic. I will kill somebody. And
so I got to tell you, my palms were actively sweating during parts of that story because I got so nervous for you. Oh, God.
It's the dumbest thing you can do. And it's so people say, how does phishing, who falls for this phishing stuff? Number one, it was just the right combination of keywords. It was Stripe, and I was expecting something from Stripe eventually so I could test out Bonjoro. And the number was just right. That's a handful of books. And it wasn't a button that I was clicking. It was a URL. But when I went back to that email, I didn't even know you could do this. When I went back to that email and hovered over the URL, at the bottom, in your browser where it tells you the URL you're going to, that was a completely different address than dashboard.stripe.com/whatever.
Yeah, so I was going to say the pro tip that you can do is always copy the link. Don't click on it, copy the link, and then manually paste it into a browser, and you'll see that it's not at all the link that you want to go to.
Yeah. Or like I had done with Amazon Prime, open up a separate browser window and go to the place that you're going to.
Yeah,
like
go to the actual account first.
I could have gone right to Stripe. I know how to do that. And then see it, to prove to myself that I've been duped, that's what I did. And then immediately it sends me this two-factor authentication. And it's like, oh yeah, I've got two-factor authentication. I don't need to be putting my account number in. I've got TFA.
Well, and then the worst part about this too is that you were on top of it. You realize what happened immediately. But what makes me mad about these ones is when it hits the elderly who are just, God bless them, they're 80. They just figured out computers 5 years ago, and now somebody's phishing attacked them. They don't know what's going on, and someone's taking them for all they're worth. And that's like the lowest form of humanity to me, is stealing from someone who's a couple years away from the grave. Anyway.
Or even just stealing from somebody who's old enough to know better and didn't in that moment. But that's the thing.
Right.
In that one split second, I clicked and changed the next several days. I changed what I was going to be doing and focusing on with one freaking clip. So there's another pro tip. Slow the fuck down. Holy shit. I could have taken 10 more minutes to do that, and I would have saved myself, no small exaggeration, 10 hours I could have saved.
10 hours, and also you probably have a tiny lingering anxiety even now. So,
listen, my stomach was wrecked for the rest of the weekend. I had so much acid on my stomach that had to finally get through my system. That there wasn't a meal I enjoyed. It was without getting too graphic. I had stomach problems that still haven't completely cleared up, just from the sheer volume of acid that my stomach produced Friday afternoon. Geez. Holy cats.
Wow, Brad, thank you for starting us off with a huge amount of anxiety. That's delightful.
Well, listen, you better get to the point where you say on that note real quick, because if you don't, I'm going to start crying.
Well, listen. Since that story only took 55 minutes, I'm going to say you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics. Your hosts have been Brad Geiger.
Making a living for the time being until he finds out what they got to that he doesn't know yet.
I will warm this up, because let's turn this into a happier note, and we'll say, hi everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his anxiety-prone friend, Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. And Dave, let's turn this thing around right now, and let's get to some good news.
The good news is I had a delightful weekend. I'm tan. I'm rested. I sent no money to Russia. I'm feeling good about it.
That was good of you. Now, what did you do over your Memorial Day weekend?
I drank a lot of margaritas and sat by a pool. That's what I did.
Good for you.
So I was very excited to do that, and now I want to sleep for 4 days. It's always funny after a vacation when you're just super tired. Although I am excited to get back to cartooning. I kind of miss it. I didn't do anything for 3 days, and which is rare for me. And so I'm excited to go draw later today, which is good.
Yeah. So listen, let's start out with this. Bonjoro. We talked about it a little bit last week. We talked about it the week before. We'll start with it here, and that is we've got some good news to pass along to our backers about specifically Bonjoro. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. So for all the patrons out there, we have some fantastic news. So everybody at the $5 and up level for over at patreon.com/comiclab, we're going to make that the level that gets all the special stuff. Yeah. And so I reached out to Bonjoro after last week's episode, and I said, hey, what can you give us in terms of a discount code for all of our backers? And they gave us a 20% off discount code. So you couple that with the annual fee, and you can get the price of Bonjoro down really significantly. And so we're going to post that up for all of our $5 backers over at patreon.com/comiclab. You can go over, grab the discount code, and Brad and I, by the way, are going to be using it as well.
I've got one more day on my free trial, so I'm going to be using it within 24 hours, as long as I've got a debit card I can use to pay with it.
Well, here's what's funny, Brad. When I emailed the guys from Bonjoro, I said, yeah, so we're a comics podcast and we'd like to share it with, and their response was, well, isn't that interesting? I guess it takes all kinds, was basically their version of what they were saying. Like, I was like, no, for real, cartoonists make a living online, and we can, I just like the response of, well, it takes all kinds, doesn't it?
Oh my God. At least they didn't say, what newspaper are you in?
So anyway, that's going up on patreon.com/comiclab for all of our $5 patrons. That's $20 off, or 20% off, not $20 off. It's actually more than $20. But I wanted to lead with this because I realized that Brad and I were very excited about talking about Bonjoro, but I want to put a big caveat on this and put the brakes on it for people. Don't sign up for Bonjoro because it still is a lot of money with 20% off. Don't sign up for it if you don't already have existing ways of monetizing your cartoon, or if you're not established enough where money is already coming in. And it's a version of advice Brad and I always have, which is basically don't put the cart before the horse. Don't start worrying about T-shirts until your comic is good. Don't start worrying about going to conventions until people are clamoring for a book. And so you don't want to sign up for a service like this until, frankly, you're on your way. You've started getting, I don't know, Brad, what would you say income-wise? I would say low 10,000 and up, maybe,
or maybe even approaching 20,000, considering where we are economically this season. But I would say several visibly healthy revenue streams going before you're even thinking about this.
And the reason why I think I want to say that is because I can imagine, Brad, someone who's in year one of their cartooning going, well, Brad and Dave said that Bonjoro is amazing. Well, it's amazing in context of having existing monetization streams. Like Brad has books, Brad has a Kickstarter, Brad has Patreon, Brad occasionally goes to conventions, Brad occasionally sends money to Russia. Brad has all these different ways of...
I've got a burgeoning family of 5 in Russia I need to keep up now.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of more mouths to feed than I did Friday morning. Let me tell you that right now.
I mean, for all of our Comic Lab listeners, you need to know the cost of living in Moscow is going up, 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 and Brad needs to get those kids fed.
That's a lot of babushkas.
A lot of babushkas. I like that both of us are racking our brain for the one thing we know in Russia that we could buy.
That's a lot of nesting dolls, I'll tell you that right now.
Nesting dolls. Literally anything we know about Russia, we're just like, borscht. We're trying to find anything. We're like,
boy, that's a lot of Mr. Gorbachev tear down that wall. I tell you that right now.
God bless America. All right, so anyway, so don't sign up. Basically, this is one of those things where it's like, don't throw thousands of dollars into making T-shirts or books until you're ready. Don't sign up for something like Bonjoro until you have monetization streams. But that being said, if you do, guess what? Comic Lab just got you 20% off. So if you're a $5 backer, go log into your account on Patreon, and we will post it up there for you, a discount code that'll get you 20% off. All right, so that's that. What was the next order of bid? I was going to say business. Business, Bradley J. Geiger.
Well, here's a question that I think we always throw this term around. And I don't know that it is as well understood as we think it is. And that is this, the DRM-free PDF. So you and I both use a DRM-free PDF. And I don't know that people understand what the hell we're talking about. So let's start with defining what DRM-free stands for. And then we'll talk about how we put them together and why we use them.
All right. Well, so I'll give you the top line. Just the basic definition of DRM is digital rights management. And it's basically software or limitations, in this case on PDFs, that would limit how someone could use it. And as anyone who has ever lived online at all or who has ever interacted with electronic devices at all knows, there will eventually be a 17-year-old kid who will figure out their way around DRM anyway, and will immediately post that to Reddit, and then you will have people figuring out how to copy entire DVDs in 2 seconds, right? So Digital rights, it's sort of an arms race. Digital rights management is used by large IP holders to protect their copyrighted and sellable information. But Brad and I often share our PDFs, our books, our ebooks as DRM-free, and it's a selling point, right?
Right.
Because you can, as a consumer, you can easily move it between devices. You can do what you want with it in terms of copying it over, maybe even sharing it with a friend. And Brad, I'll just speak to why I do it, and then you can speak to why you do it. For me, every Sheldon comic, every Drive comic that I have ever produced is digitally available to you on a website for free. Right. It's out there. It's already up there. So what I'm doing when I kickstart a book is I'll say, hey, if you want a physical copy of the book, that's going to be $20. And you want to go $25, you'll also get a DRM-free ebook, right? Or you could back the book for $5 and get a DRM-free ebook. Because for me, what I'm selling there is not some lockdown IP. What I'm selling is basically an ease of format way of reading my comic. You can already read my comic for free on the web. So this is just a way of saying, like, oh, you want to read it on your Kindle? Oh, you want to read it on your iPad? Well, here you go. Here's a PDF or an ebook of it. And we're going to make it DRM free so you can move it around to any device you want. So Brad, what's your take on that? How do you think of DRM free in your mind, and why do you do it?
I'm very similar to you. In other words, a DRM PDF is maybe something like what you would get at Comixology and so forth. And number one, I don't know that the time I'm going to put into digital rights management is going to save me that much. In other words, for me, it becomes a return on investment. How much time, how much trouble is it going to be for me to implement a DRM on one of these files? And what do I really get out of it? And I take the same attitude as Dave. Most of my stuff is out there. There is some stuff that's behind a Patreon as an exclusive, but most of it's out there. And frankly, I don't know that I'm saving that much money or protecting that much by going through that. Plus, it is a value add when you say that you're giving somebody a DRM-free PDF. That means that they can move it from their iPad to their iPhone to their Kindle to their desktop effortlessly. Whereas if you get something maybe through Comixology or one of the other big groups, that might not be as easy to do. Whereas with this, it's as easy as just copying a file. And of course, we tell our backers and our customers, please don't share this. And I would hasten to say 90, maybe 95% of them respect that. You know, and of course, there's going to be that one odd person that doesn't respect that, and then that's what Blasty.co is for, which is something that we've talked about on the show earlier. I've got all of that stuff, all those ebooks set up to be an automatic blast, and I don't even think about it anymore. And so as soon as that stuff does get posted, Blasty takes care of it and makes it harder for anyone to actually find that stuff on a Google search. So I really don't get all wound up in digital rights management. And it probably comes from the fact that Dave and I both did this at a time where everything was free on the web. And so it's a little bit easier for us to justify. But now going past the digital rights management, Dave, how do you set up a PDF of one of your collections in terms of just like the basic specifications?
So I use Adobe InDesign, a layout program, and that lays out all my text of my book, everything from page 1 to page 264 for Drive or something, right? But my covers I build in Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. And so what I tend to do to create a simulacrum of a full and complete book as a PDF is I will import the front cover right before page 1 and the back cover right after page 264. And I'll just create a new page in my InDesign layout, and the cover will basically be laid out there, and again on the back at the final page of the book. And then when I export the PDF, as far as people know when they're swiping through, oh, you see the front cover, oh, you see the end papers, oh, you see the title page, that kind of thing. And that way it's a complete sort of a look. Is that the question you were getting at, Brad?
Yep. And you do, in my opinion, I think you're doing it just right because...
Oh, that's all I need. That's all I need.
Well, I fumbled with this for a while, especially because iPads are more forgiving, iPads are more forgiving. Kindles are not. And when I would export that to my Kindle, I would get a really weird front page because it borrows from the front page what it gives your cover in terms of the icon that you see on your screen on your iPad.
Right.
So yeah, definitely do that. And if you're worried about, I can't imagine like 2-page spreads are very important in a digital reading experience. But if it is, just realize that importing your cover as page 1 means that you need to put another page after that so that page 2 starts on the right-hand side.
Can I admit to a failing? Because this is a good moment to admit to a failing.
Yeah.
So I don't own a Kindle. I've never used a Kindle. I don't know nor understand the differences between Kindle and other things. And so this is a form of mirror marketing. And I just wanted to cop up to my own failure here because it's good to admit to failures.
Yeah.
I have never produced a Kindle-specific or Kindle-friendly ebook because I don't use them. And so I know this is mirror marketing, but I'm like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I don't know how to do that. Why would I do that? I know that there are a billion Kindles in the world and that it would be super smart for me to do it. And anytime I do a Kickstarter, people go, hey, are you going to produce a Kindle version? And I go, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
Well, here's a few thoughts on that. And actually, so I started at the other side of that because I couldn't afford an iPad. So I got a Kindle Fire, which I thought would be just as good. And so I came in being one of those people that was like, oh, I want something specifically for my Kindle. And I went through all of that to create a Mobi file that was specifically for a Kindle. And what I found very quickly was 2 things. Number one, there wasn't enough audience for me to justify the amount of time I was putting into it. And number 2, a PDF on a Kindle, or at least a Kindle Fire, works just as well. The problem with that is getting it onto their devices is like pulling teeth. I actually, and I haven't checked in the last couple of years because I did get an iPad and never went back. But to get a PDF onto your Kindle, you have to download a special app from Amazon called Send to Kindle. And then you open that up on your desktop, drag the PDF over to that. It'll send it to your Kindle, and then you'll have it next time you sync. But it is not, and very often, the cover's not right, or it gives you like a generic cover that says PDF. It's not great. And I have experimented with using software called Caliber that supposedly puts a cover image on there, but I've not had 100% accuracy with that either. All of which to say, you can I just tell my Kindle people, there's the PDF. It'll work perfectly on your Kindle, and here's how you get it there. And that's as far as I'm willing to go.
Well, and this is where my mirror marketing fails, because they go, Dave, I love the book. Any way you could make a Kindle-specific version? And my mental response is always like, hey, any way you could buy an iPad? That's a great idea. Why don't you get an iPad?
It would make this a lot easier if you would just get an iPad.
You do have to make those calls, though, in your business as a cartoonist where you have to say, I can't produce something for everything. Like some because then the next guy's going to go, hey, I got a Nook. Can you make one for Nook?
Exactly.
And you're like, no, I can't. I can't do everything. I'm a single person.
Oh, man, then as a Nook user, I'm screwed. As a Nook user, you were screwed a long time ago.
Listen, you got screwed when you plunked down your credit card buying that Nook, let me tell you. Because that is a company that's scheduled for some Chapter 11 in the near future. So anyway, it's like my version of investing is this. If I don't understand it, I don't invest in it. Like my brother-in-law loves to play the stock market, but if I don't know or understand a stock, I'm not going to buy that stock, right?
Right.
And so a version of that guides my cartooning career, which is that if I don't know or understand how people read ebooks on Xboxes or Kindles or Nooks, I'm not going to make it for that because I can only do so much, and I might as well focus on what I'm good at and what I can create. It's a version of like, you can only handle so much, and so tackle what you can.
What I would suggest is, especially with people with their, what's that called, the Retina display.
Yes.
Whereas I used to be kind of a hard and fast 72 DPI guy, now I find myself bumping that up towards 150, even 200. And if the file size seems big, remember, especially like on a Kickstarter or something like this, you can often offer people a high res and a low res, and high res with an asterisk, not high res like we talk about in print, it's just 300, 400, 600 DPI. But a high res for a PDF would be about 150 to 200 DPI. And a low res version that if they're worried about it taking up too much room on their unit, then that's a 72 DPI. And because you're doing DRM free, it doesn't matter. They can keep both of those wherever they want to store it, on their desktop, on the cloud, and download whichever one they want, read it, delete it, from their device, re-download it as many times. You give them all kinds of options that they wouldn't have otherwise, right? And so it solves a lot of problems.
Well, I think that gives a fairly buttony answer to that about digital rights management, right?
Yeah.
Or the only other thing that I would say about digital rights management is this again goes back to our idea of like, don't operate from fear. If your great fear is that someone is going to steal your work, right? Yeah. On one level, that means that there is a market and an interest for it. So great, that's good.
Yeah.
But B, as long as you prepare the files in a way that they can't create it in print, which is where the money is,
right?
Then you're okay. I think like you just protect yourself as much as you can from the outset, and also just have a little trust in humanity that the average person is not going to steal it. And if they do, it's at a scale that's so small to you that it's not going to impact your business.
Yep. Take it from a guy that does not safe for work stuff that is prime target for pirating and stuff like this. At some point, like Dave said, you've got to protect yourself. You can't take a laissez-faire attitude. But at some point, you've got to say, okay, they took what I did yesterday, and all that is advertising for what I'm going to do tomorrow.
That's right. And as Brad's new business manager, Sergey, would tell you, it's a good idea to have work advertising for you for future income for family.
I've already, man, I cannot do Russian. I've already upgraded to the higher degree of borscht.
Yeah, that wasn't bad. I like that Russian. That was good.
Oh God, my son,
Brad, you're gonna have to start polishing that up. By the way,
yeah, no kidding. So I can talk to my new benefactees.
Yeah, exactly.
So listen, let's go on to another topic because this is one we've been wanting to talk about this for a long time, and I love this topic. Dave, if you could time travel back to your 20s. What one piece of advice would you give to yourself?
Ooh, back to my 20s. What one piece of advice? Lay off the carbs. That's the one piece of advice.
No bullshit. In your 20s, you could eat the carbs all you want. It's in your 30s, you got to start laying off. Enjoy yourself yet. In
your 20s. Enjoy that last hurrah of like being able to eat a pounder bag of M&Ms. Yeah. So what advice would I give to myself in my 20s? Oh, so here's the counter argument. What advice could I give myself in my 20s that my 20-year-old self would have listened to?
Now we're talking about a much narrower range of topics.
Right. This actually relates to our conversation today, which is, it's funny how anxiety has come up a couple times in today's chat. But I would tell I would have a couple pieces of advice, which is, one is that the internet is a tricky place to start a career. And I know that 25-year-old me was very conscious of everyone else's successes and my comparative failure, right? That was a big part of my 20s was, God, look at, oh boy, user-friendly's doing amazing. Oh, Penny Arcade is building a career for themselves. Oh, I'm trying to think of other comics that were big in my 20s. Anybody else that's not me is doing great.
Sluggy Freelance.
Oh my God, Sluggy Freelance. I would check on his successes all the time. So my advice to my 20s is that classic internet advice of don't compare your failures to other people's highlight reels.
Yeah.
That if you are plugging along and working away, focus on your own career and your own hallmarks of success, and don't worry so much about how you are quote unquote falling behind somebody else.
Yeah.
If you keep plugging away, Dave, 20-year-old Dave, you're going to be fine. Just keep working. Keep your head down. Pay attention to their careers for what you can learn from it, but don't worry so much that you are being left in the dust or being, left behind. That's one piece of advice I've given
kind
myself.
Of like it's a marathon, not a sprint type of mindset.
Exactly. When you're 25, you just want it all right now. You want your full career right now. And I needed to tell myself, like, it's okay, champ. Bring it down a notch. You're going to be okay.
Well, especially because all through your teens, you couldn't wait to be an adult so you could do adult things and be an adult cartoonist and be a business person. And it's like, okay, I'm finally that. Now, where's my success? Where is it?
Yeah. Boy, I have a lot of thoughts I want to give to my 20-year-old self, but let's let you do one or two first, and then I'm going to come back to me. Go ahead. What would you tell? All right, you're time traveling back to 25-year-old Brad. He's got those glasses on. You're going to want to tell him about those glasses. You're going to want to tell him maybe to eat a sandwich now and again.
Yeah.
So what else would you tell him?
Well, listen, number one, I would say, and we've talked about this earlier, but it's worth coming around again to, and that is not to go to a comic convention unless you really got a good shot at making that money back. And particularly, don't go to that comic convention unless you've got the disposable income to pay for it right up front. In other words, don't reach for the credit card for that air ticket to or for those table fees or airline, like an airline ticket.
Oh, air ticket. Wow, that's every once in a while, like the weird Midwestern comes out where you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna buy my air ticket now, Martha. Sure.
What do you call them? Airline ticket.
Plane ticket.
Now I can't say it without it sounding strange. Plane ticket.
Oh, sure, I'm going to be riding on one of those airboats, those boats that fly through the air. Sure. I'll be taking that down to Atlanta. I've got my air ticket. Mm-hmm.
Oh, the Method killed me.
Oh, sure, I said hello to the sky captain as I boarded the airboat. Sure.
Oh, okay, well, don't put that plane ticket. It doesn't even sound right now. Don't buy your air travel, huh? Don't buy
when transiting between cities, friends. When you're buying your air ticket for your skyboat, make sure not to use your plastic money, as we call it. Ha ha! That's something Mother and I like to joke about. Plastic money.
Well, don't do that. Don't put that stuff on a credit card thinking you're going to make it back. Because what happens is, the con number one, you make some of it back, but not all of it back. Con number two, you make most of it back, but not all of it back. Con number three, you make it all back and maybe a couple bucks more that you splurge on to celebrate your good fortune and don't put it back into the business. And by the end of the year, you've racked up a nice little credit card debt for yourself that now you've got to shovel like crazy because of those insane interest rates to get rid of. So
can I ask you this? This is a sincere question because you've mentioned this a couple of times that you would go to you would turn to a credit card to do a convention.
Oh yeah.
Did this actually happen? You did this?
Oh yeah, like early on, I would, and it had a little bit less sting because I had a well-paying day job and I could keep myself from getting into too much trouble. But looking back, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much I paid in interest fees that I should have been managing that money so much smarter back then. It really kind of makes me cringe. It's so easy to lose track of that, and then come to the end of the year and go, oh gosh, this is not good. I got to pay that down.
Oh boy, that's a great. That's a great bit of advice, is that I would never, in general, I think it's smart advice business-wise, is to always have a cash flow situation rather than a credit flow situation where you're paying for things with money you've already made. I know that's easier said than done sometimes, but in general, boy, try to avoid using credit cards because that can be an escalator that you're constantly trying to run down against. The flow of the escalator is trying to pay off a credit card while incurring new debt,
And that's why I keep talking about the gambler's mentality because, I think there's a lot of people that fall into that category where they're like, oh, that's okay. I'm going to make, I'm placing this bet with money I don't have. but it's going to be okay because everybody tells me that, this show is a great show, and then and for me, it was Heroes Con. Everybody told me, especially for superhero comics, Heroes Con is a great con. And I went there and just stood alone for the entire weekend. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I sunk this much money into doing that show. And I don't remember specifically whether I bought anything on a credit card for that one, but you see my point. It's really easy to rack up a debt and then to go, oh geez, I really need to pull back in this next year and get rid of that because it's not a good thing.
So one other thing that I would tell my 25-year-old self is, I used to be, and still am in some respects, I used to be a workaholic because I wanted it so bad. Brad, you know that feeling where you just want it so bad.
Well, and you've got the energy at that point too. I mean,
you do, and
you
you don't have kids yet, so literally your schedule is wide open. And so, my 25-year-old self, I would work that 40-hour a week job at Mattel and then come home and do 25 to 35 hours a week on Sheldon. And it's great. I wouldn't stop myself from doing that because, in large part, that made my career, was that desire to make it happen and the work behind that desire. So that's fine. But I would say this to myself is, for God's sake, 25-year-old self, you don't think that this is going to happen, but focus on your posture because eventually it's going to catch up with you.
Yeah.
Because of my overworking, I ended up getting, as you know, Brad, costoclavicular syndrome in my right arm.
Yeah.
In my shoulder, my right shoulder. And it was 2 years of physical therapy, like 2-3 times a week to get that fixed. So if you're going to be a workaholic, and that's fine, just make sure you're taking breaks, 25-year-old self. Boy, talk about a message that 25-year-old me would not listen to. 25-year-old me would look at me and be like, whatever, old man, I'm eternal. I'm strong as an ox.
And I've been doing this for months, and I feel fine.
Yeah. Sit down before you fall down, old man. That's what 25-year-old self would say to me.
Well, I've got one other because this is one I really wish that I had gone back in time, and that is, don't get all tied up in that one project. In other words, look at yourself as a creator, not a guy who does that thing. And the difference is, and I've said this before, I would have stopped Greystone Inn way earlier and maybe transitioned out of Evil Inc. a little earlier and did some other things. And I would have kind of freed myself up to be Brad Guigar. And in 2005, I'm going to do a comic about pirates. And in 2006, it's going to be a space opera. And in 2007, it's going to be this other thing, maybe a buddy comedy with, college roommates. I think I would have freed myself up to do more of that. And I think at the end, I would have stretched them out over further years as I got better. But I think by the time we get to 2018, I'd have such a repertoire behind me that I think it would have been a benefit to the work that I'm doing now.
It's so funny, though, because I agree with you that there's a part of me looking back that I remember at the time when our friends Chris Straub and like David Malky were working on a bunch of different projects. And I was like, you got to focus on one thing. What are you doing jumping around a lot? And so I don't know that I would have even listened to that advice, but looking back, like, it's really solid advice, because here's our problem, Brad, is that we grew up in an era where, for lack of a better, guidepost, we all wanted to be Charles Schultz, and he did Peanuts for 50 years. And by God, we were going to do Greystone Inn for 50 years or Sheldon for 50 years. And so that's what we wanted to be. But now we're in an age where building and branding a career around yourself as an artist, you can bring your audience with you to different titles if you do it right.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't beat up 25-year-old Brad too much, because he was doing the best with the information he had in front of him. And that mostly was, you build a career as a cartoonist around a title, and by God, you're going to die doing that title.
Yeah. But now, like, if I was looking at a younger person starting now in 2018, I'd say don't stick with a mistake just because you've spent a long time making that mistake. Feel
That
free.
the sunk cost is already sunk at this point. Move on to the next thing.
And move on. And it's not a failure. It's actually an opportunity to do something new and better. And by the way, like I've told this to a couple people that were struggling with it, you can always go back to that thing. This thing that you're working on now, you can always go back to it. There's nothing says you can't say, okay, I've worked on this other thing for 6 months. Now I'm going to go back to that other thing for a little while.
You can go
it's
home again.
Wide open. You can do whatever you want to do. And yeah, you mentioned the two guys that are always on my mind with this, Chris and Dave. Those guys early on got it. It was all about what they wanted to do, not necessarily this title that they became known for and started to get some notoriety for. And they were right on.
Right. Well, before we move on to the next topic, I want to just reiterate to 25-year-old me, really, honest to God, David, lay off the carbs and the refined sugars. Like, you've got to, you're going to regret this. So stop with the milkshakes. Stop with the, come on, treat yourself better.
Ooh, yeah, that's a biggie. That stuff. I did see pictures of myself from the camping trip, and I think maybe it was just because I was wearing a big sweatshirt, but it's like, yeah, I could stand to lose a couple. Holy cats!
All right, so next topic, Brad. You had actually brought this up on a phone call earlier, and I wanna circle back around on it because I think it's a fantastic topic for this show.
Yeah,
and that is this. You had brought up the idea of people that are actually cartooning in the wrong format for what they should be. That when you're doing a strip, and maybe you ought to be doing long form. Can you let's start from the top. Take me through this and take people through how you determine the right format for the story you're telling, the jokes you're telling, the characters you have, and then how do you implement that?
Oh, I've been so obsessed with this lately because it's something I see all the time, and it's like when you're going to buy a new Toyota, and then all of a sudden all you can see on the road is Toyotas. You know, this is one of those things. So here's the deal: if you are doing a comic strip that has a storyline, in other words, it's got a story that carries from update to update, whether that's Monday to Tuesday to Friday, or Monday to Wednesday, whenever your update schedule is. If you've got a storyline that flows throughout, you should not be doing a strip. Not in today's day and age. You should be doing a long form comic and either updating by the page or even updating by the chapter, depending on what you're doing. And here's why. And this just the reason I bumped this up on our list of things to talk about. I saw this comic. It was a really, really nice, dandy little comic. I really liked it. And there's this like a paranormal investigator, and he's talking to a ghost. And the one that I saw, of course, with the comic strip, along with web comics in general, you get plopped into the middle of a storyline. But I got plopped into this strip, and it grabbed me, which is rare, right? How many times, and not just for me, I'm not super picky, but just to anybody, something to catch your taste. It grabbed me.
Right.
And the first panel said, you've been possessed by a ghost, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, and it led up to a really pleasant little punchline. It was like, and the drawing style was nice. And it's like, oh, okay, I kind of like this. And I hit previous. And the first panel said, you've been possessed by a ghost. And then it led up to a different punchline. But it wasn't quite as enjoyable because I had just read that first panel 1 moment ago. And then I hit previous again, and it was, you've been possessed by a ghost, and blah, 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 blah. And this story, it was like those old soap opera comics, right? Where you had the first panel basically recapped yesterday's strip. You had one panel of advancement and then one panel of, foretelling what was going to happen tomorrow.
Oh, like those dang Spider-Man comics, the comic strip.
Yes, or Apartment 3G and stuff like this.
Apartment 3G, yeah, absolutely.
So, and I realized that this it was a really stilted way of doing this comic, and this comic could be really funny, and this person could be putting out a wonderful thing, except this person thinks that they should be doing a comic strip. And part of that, I think, is because this younger generation of cartoonists who are coming up now, many of them saw the people like you and me and Scott and Chris and all of those people who were doing comic strips in the early 2000s. And the reason we were doing comic strips was twofold. Half of us still had a big desire to become newspaper syndicated cartoonists. And on the other side, as I've said on this show a million times, the reason we did that was that it was an ad-supported model,
right.
And being able to update every day meant that you could make more ad revenue.
Exactly.
Well, the newspaper thing is out, right? We all get that, hopefully. And the ad revenue has changed to an extent that most of us have turned to crowdfunding because the ad revenue is so soft. Which is, by the way, great, because I think a lot of us are doing better in a crowdfunding environment than they ever did in advertising. So all of which to say, there's no need to do a comic strip anymore. And if you're doing the kind of humor that you're telling a story, the comic strip is not the best way to do that. The comic strip was built for a daily production. Comic strip was a direct offshoot of newspapers, right? That's what they were created for. 4 panels, you tell a little joke, I don't think there was a whole lot of continuity in the original strips going back to like Mutt and Jeff and the Katzenjammer Kids. They were all kind of standalone, if I remember right, to begin with. And then people came along, and then there'd be a theme that would go throughout, like maybe a Peanuts strip. There'd be a theme for a week. Lucy would have the football for the entire week, and different things would happen. And then we have things like Bloom County and Pogo, and now there's a storyline, and these were good, but there was a necessary impurity in them, right? It was like, these are good, but you got to read them with the sense that this was part of a daily newspaper, and it really...
Wait, did you just make a Green Lantern reference, a necessary impurity?
I thought I snuck it past you.
Oh, jeez Louise. All right, keep going.
I past you. But so here's what I'm driving to. In today's day and age, there is no reason for you to be doing a strip anymore, unless you're doing something that's standalone and you're really good at writing that kind of humor that can happen in 3 to 4 panels. But if you're trying to shoehorn a story into 3 and 4 panels that get updated, every now and again, every day, every other day, what have you, that's not the best way to tell that story. And you're not chained to that newspaper strip format anymore. So that's why I say, if you're doing a storyline kind of strip, and that's great. And I'm telling you, this is coming from a guy that's been there. I did a newspaper style strip for years and years and years. When I started reimagining Evil Inc. as a comic book and let my writing take the shape of a page as opposed to trying to hit that punchline every 4 panels, you're going to find your writing improves, because you're not like that guy at the party that stands there and every third word is like a punchline. Right. And it's not a good punchline because it's all he had time to think of in that time that he was, between the time you were shoving peanuts in your mouth. Right.
Right.
That scattershot kind of approach. If you let your writing relax and take a little bit more time building up that tension, and you're not scrambling to get that punchline in the 4th panel, you're going to find your writing improves. And you can put a long form comic on the web with just as much ease as you can do a strip. I think you really need to look at why you're doing a strip, and if it doesn't add up for you, like the way I just said it probably doesn't, reconsider your approach.
I think that's solid advice, to the point where I don't know that I could say that better. I think the one thing that I would say, and we talked about this in an earlier Comic Lab, is that I think we basically have a new form of comic that's come around in the last couple of years, and that's the scroll.
Yeah.
And so you've got the panel, great for single one-shot jokes. You got the comic strip, great for, like Brad said, regularly, quickly updating either comic strips or punchline gag-a-day stories. You've got the page a day, or page an update, which is great for long form. You've got comic book, which is traditional Marvel DC. You've got graphic novel, which is great for long form. And then you also have the scroll update, which can either be a chunk or a chapter or a section of a story. And And so I think you find the one that best fits what you're trying to do, and don't shoehorn that in. I'm not going to repeat what Brad said, but basically, any one of those formats is great, depending on what you want to do with it. So just make sure you're in the right format. It's like a pair of shoes. The human foot can do all sorts of things. It can dance. It can play baseball. I don't know where I'm going with this. It can run. You just got to have the right shoes on.
I'm just waiting to hear the words necessary and purity in there somewhere.
Oh, boy. I should have went with a Green Lantern reference. I'm learning. I'm learning how to talk to Brad Guigar. That's...
Oh, but listen, one thing, if you're listening right now and you're doing a strip and you think that I might be talking to you, then I probably am. But if you take me up on this challenge, write in and let us know and kind of give us a little before and after. I would love to see the results of some of this in real life. So if you take me up on this challenge, let us know, because I'd love to see it.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see what people are able to adapt for a different format. And I will say this: I recently, Sheldon is still a comic strip, and whatever Brad tells me, it's going to stay a comic strip. By God!
But you're not doing a storyline.
But I will say this, though, is that I have recently, and I don't know if recent is the right word, maybe in the last year and a half, I've started, it was delicate at first, but now I'm doing it all the time. Sheldon is now a vertically oriented rather than a horizontally oriented comic strip. I think that for a billion reasons online, that's just a better way to do it. And then a really large chunk of the Sheldon audience now actually sees it panel by panel, not even as a strip anymore. It's just one panel, second panel, third panel, fourth panel. So that's on Instagram and Twitter and the like. And frankly, I think that if I could do panel by panel everywhere, I would do it. There's a way to do it on my website. I just haven't figured out how to do it yet. But I've really come to like the complete step away from the comic strip. So anyway, I don't know. Take that with a grain of salt in terms of your adapting it to your own comics. But I think we're at a great time of not being wedded to one or two formats. There's a myriad to choose from for comics.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like so two things. Number one, it's like Scott McCloud said, almost 20 years ago, in terms of we're not beholden to the format anymore, but where he rightly so pointed immediately to the Infinite Scroll. And what is happening is that there's a lot of different places that people have taken this. But the main thing is that 4-panel or 3-panel horizontal, which was great during the advertising boom, is the first thing that you should look at changing. Especially, again, like I say, especially if you're doing story. And number two, from a Machiavellian point of view, Dave, when you put those vertical comics into a book, I would imagine you get one comic to a page. Am I right?
Well, what I'll probably do is I'll probably reformat it where it's 2 across, so it's becomes a cube.
Oh, okay.
Or I'll figure out a way to relay it out, which is going to involve more legwork. But I think there's you could absolutely put it tall, but then you got a lot of negative space on either side of the comic when you put it into a book format. Because my Sheldon books tend to be kind of square; they're 8.5 by 9. So it's a kind of squarish book. So if I put a totally vertical strip in there, there'd be a lot of negative space on either side.
Well, what I was
I think I'll probably end up reformatting it.
What I was thinking is that with a strip, you definitely get three strips to a page, right?
Oh yeah, I used to do that all the time. Yeah.
But under this format, it sounds like it's closer to 2 strips per page.
Yeah, and maybe or maybe just a strip per page, and that's okay.
No, that's what I mean. From a Machiavellian standpoint, you get a much thicker book out of a smaller or same amount of material, and that's just nothing but good. Because a thicker book sells better. You can bump that price up a little bit. That I want a thicker book.
I agree with you. I don't think anyone is complaining about being able to, and also because I used to put 3 Sheldon strips per page, like Brad said, they were horizontally oriented. And frankly, it's just a more pleasant read to have it bigger on the page. So you're not only getting more in terms of value, perceived value when you pick up a book and it's thicker, but the reading experience, I think, is better when they're bigger on the page. So I don't know that anyone's complaining or throwing up their arms when you reformat like that. I think it actually benefits all parties involved. Well, Bradley, I think as your sky captain here on the airboat, since you've purchased an air ticket, I think why don't you bring us in for a smooth landing, Bradley?
Well, in that case, I'll say that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Well, and one of your hosts today have been Brad Guigar, the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com. Sure.
Wait for me. I have finished Borscht. And Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped.
I can't do it. And cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com. And Drive at drivecomic.com.
You know what it sounds like? That doesn't sound like a Russian. It sounds like someone who's doing a terrible job dungeon mastering.
Oh, I got to tell you, my son, who's my older son, Alex, has gotten really into comedy. Like he can do it, and he can do voices like as good as you and Scott. Like I should bring him in here sometime to do the Russian. He does a Russian. I'm so amazed just watching him grow. It's just I just had to take that moment of fatherliness. Sorry.
That's awesome. That's a unique, wonderful joy when kids start to be able to take on new talents and surprise you. So that's awesome. Anyway, I cut us off by voices, but the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net.
Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice, patreon.com/comiclab.